deny, attack, reverse, deny, attack, reverse, deny, attack, reverse. Have you heard of the term DARVO? No? As you just saw, it stands for deny, attack, and then reverse, victim and offender. It's a psychological pattern perpetrators of fairly extreme wrongdoings typically engage in, such as institutional abuse, interpersonal abuse, and crisis management behavior, and in more specific detail, acts like rape, torture, and genocide. Israel almost always responds to any type or scale of allegations through a DARVO-like institutional sequence. Strongly deny the allegation, attack the accuser, and repositions itself as the true victim of defamation, antisemitism, terrorism, or potential annihilation. With today's transparency on Israel's genocidal and ethnic cleansing behavior across the occupied Palestinian territories of Gaza and the West Bank, in addition to the intense aggression and destruction in Lebanon, how can this newfound revelation reinform our outlook, while thinking about DARVO, on Israel's overall discourse throughout its lifetime, even from before its creation as a nation? And if we think about it, Israel has only recently started losing the public relations war. There's no denying that its historic perception as truth outward communication strategy led to its consideration by many as a nation to be trusted, defended, protected, and acknowledged as righteous, civil, and moral. But now, with facts and data at hand within seconds, along with substantial evidence that has risen to the surface, shouldn't we re-examine and gauge the true humanity, morality, and civility of this nation? And so we must revisit its entire narrative, its past. In Israel's case, this isn't a long time, a mere century, if that. And then intensely put under the microscope its present, and then prepare for its future narratives. And when we do that, when we relook at the entirety of its existence, its denials, accusatory attacks, and self-labeling victimhood, we discover that this Zionist entity has really had the world's number.
You've been had, you've been took, you've been hoodwinked, bamboozled.
When speaking of Israel's past, there's a major disadvantage for those who want to reveal the real impact of the truth. Time has elapsed, and with it, so do the intensities of the events that shaped the past. The emotions, if not gone, are no longer intensely felt. The cries of Palestinian pain and suffering are muted, if not silent. The scandal fades. Partial truths emerge decades later, and relevance, and even more importantly, accountability, disappear into history. For Israel, the DARVO cycle appears in narratives surrounding massacres during the 1948 war, particularly the Deir Yassin massacre. Initial reports were dismissed by the Israelis and projected to the world as Arab propaganda. Palestinians speaking of expulsions and atrocities were accused of fabricating stories to destroy Israel's credibility internationally. Israel again framed itself as the endangered party fighting for existence against annihilation. The world at the time listened and believed Israel. Years later, historians and archives, even Israeli, such as Benny Morris and Ilan Pape, complicated earlier denials, revealing clear evidence of such massacres and inhumane behavior. But by then, the world had largely moved on. The Arab-Israeli wars followed a similar discourse structure. From 1948 through the Suez Crisis and the Six-Day War, Israel consistently presented itself as reacting defensively to Arab aggression. Critics at the time, who pointed to Israeli military planning, retaliatory raids, or strategic ambitions, were often portrayed as hostile to Israel's right to exist. Israel positioned itself as the perpetual victim, surrounded by existential enemies, and reminded the world of the new Nazis looking to annihilate the Jews. Again, decades later, when archival revelations appeared challenging the generally accepted perception that Israel was indeed defending itself by unprovokingly attacking the Arabs, no one cared or put any value on these historical corrections, questioning Israeli honesty, integrity, and legitimacy. From the early 2000s and up to 2023 and 2024 Gaza bombardments, the same DARVO sequence reappeared around the IDF's use of white phosphorus weaponry in Gaza and Lebanon. First came denial, then critics and human rights groups bringing these events to light were attacked as anti-Israel or anti-Semitic. Israel cast itself as the real victim, arguing it alone was being unfairly scrutinized while fighting terrorism. Documented proof confirmed phosphorus use. Israel then acknowledged such use, but then initiated an international debate on the legality of such weaponry when utilized against resistance entities like Hezbollah and Hamas, whom they, Israel, considered as terrorist organizations. Rather than addressing any accountability on the use of white phosphorus in targeting and killing civilians, Israel chose to deflect the narrative.
סיפור של הזרחן שהופעל בלבנון. אנחנו פועלים בצורה אחת ברורה, באופן חוקי ועל פי הדין הבינלאומי.
Finally, and perhaps most controversially, was the Abu Kabir organ harvesting scandal that followed the same DARVO path. Allegations involving unauthorized tissue extraction from Palestinian prisoners and casualties were initially condemned as anti-Semitic blood libel. Later admissions confirmed such practices had occurred. Responsibility was marginalized to isolated individuals. Time absorbed the inhumanity, the outrage, and the scandal slowly dissolved into memory, without any meaningful consequence. And today, whispers of similar organ harvesting tactics are coming to the surface, of mutilated Palestinian bodies with unlicensed autopsies, with post-operative scar wounds that don't align with any previous afflictions or injuries. Yet the world doesn't ask. It still believes that Israel cannot act in such a barbaric way. I really do appreciate you taking the time and watching the Kennedy Chronicles. Please do join our community by subscribing so that you don't miss out on any content regarding the Arab and Muslim history, identity, and modern condition. And if you really do enjoy the channel week in and week out and would like to support us even further, please do join us at our YouTube membership program as well as on Patreon. Thanks again. In the present phase of the Israeli-Palestinian crisis, the logic of DARVO hasn't disappeared, but has accelerated under the speed of modern media warfare. Allegations emerge. Denial follows immediately. Critics are condemned as anti-Semitic or terrorist sympathizers. And then, the controversy slowly dissolves beneath the scale of ongoing violence. Yesterday's scandal becomes buried beneath today's catastrophe. One of the most controversial examples concerns the events of October 2023 and the long-debated Hannibal Directive. Questions emerged over how many Israelis may have been killed by Israeli fire during attempts to prevent hostage capture or while combating Hamas fighters. Early discussions of this possibility was often dismissed as conspiracy theory or Hamas propaganda. Critics raising questions about helicopter fire, tank shelling, or rules of engagement were accused of trying to minimize Hamas's atrocities or of being anti-Semitic. Yet over time, Israeli media investigations, eyewitness testimony, and military admissions acknowledged that Israeli forces likely killed Israeli civilians. Just to give you a clearer picture, the two sites where most Israelis were killed, the Nova Music Festival, where 378 people were killed, and en route 232, where over 250 people were killed, are the same two sites the clear-cut use of devastating artillery and helicopter gunship fire can be seen, with the total destruction of vehicles and surrounding territory. That's more than half the total of deaths on October 7th. The exact number remains disputed of Israelis killed by the IDF, but it's a higher and more significant number that Israel wants you to believe in. The maintaining of the highest casualty figure matters because Hamas-caused casualties remain the central driver to Israel's international narrative of absolute victimhood and moral justification for the war that soon followed. The same DARVO pattern appears in allegations surrounding the abuse of Palestinian detainees. Initially, such claims are often dismissed as more anti-Israel propaganda or blood libel. The accuser becomes the suspect. Then reports by former prisoners, NGOs, and some Israeli whistleblowers describe beatings, abuse, and rape while in detention. The narrative narrows towards isolated incidents or rogue soldiers. Public attention eventually moves on, without structural accountability because there's so much devastation happening in parallel. The Palestinian prisoner abuse scandal dissolves into the background noise of war. Other controversies follow similar trajectories. Accusations of deliberately targeting journalists, medics, hospitals, aid workers, or starvation tactics, mass displacement, and collective punishment. They're all first rejected outright. Critics are accused of ignoring Israeli suffering or of blood libel. What begins as anti-Semitic exaggeration later becomes reframed as unfortunate but necessary wartime policy. The moral debate moves from whether something happened to whether it was justified. This is the deeper mechanism of modern conflict management, not necessarily erasing or suppressing truth forever, but for Israel surviving it long enough from a PR perspective for truth to lose political and emotional force. In a permanent war cycle, denial doesn't need to succeed completely. It only needs to delay accountability until outrage is exhausted and history absorbs the scandal into yet another unresolved and forgotten chapter. In looking towards the future of Israel's use of the DARVO sequence as part of its international image management, I don't see where else it can be applied where it hasn't been already. It's already stooped to the lowest of lows in human decency when it comes to Palestinians. It has already, in many points along its history, killed its own citizens. It has committed a genocide, ethnically cleansed, and without doubt, caused a man-made famine. What's left? One final act: the use of a nuclear weapon. Some lessons on Israel's past and present behavior are important here. Israel has cried out of imminent existential threats throughout its history, only to, without warning, attack first. Israel has denied the existence of its nuclear arsenal, so DARVO has indeed already been triggered. We've reached a certain threshold of plausible deniability. Israel has shown up to the very second that it has the immoral standing to kill hundreds of thousands of people, including women and children, with no accountability or remorse. All these are facts and contribute to a very troubling equation. No country in the world can claim such a frightening composition of past deeds, moral standing, destructive ambition, and tactical capability as does Israel. So can anyone state with full confidence and certainty that Israel would never resort to the use of nuclear weapons?
There's a war between the United States, Israel, and Iran that is going on right now in the Middle East. And under those circumstances, that is actually different from what we've been experiencing for the last 40, 50 years. And so under those circumstances, there's only one power in the Middle East that has a nuke, and it's Israel. And so the question is, what are the circumstances? What are the boundaries? Are there any boundaries? They don't acknowledge that they have them.
In the past, with its use of DARVO, the world believed Israel without question. In the present, Israel has attempted to maintain its DARVO approach, but has been unsuccessful in achieving the final element, the reversal of who's the victim and who's the offender in the public's perception. What does the future have in store? Well, since there's no effective chance for denial to truly exist any longer in light of modern technology and connectivity, I believe DARVO to be on its last legs. My final words, though, aren't for those who recognize this pattern or for those who are just realizing it. More importantly, my words are for those who are still blind to it. Come on, you lot, wake up. You've seen the cycles over and over again. Keep Israel aside for a moment. Any similar situation when a friend of yours lies to you time and time again. It would be unacceptable, right? You'd call them out, wouldn't you? Or totally disengage from them, right? A country, Israel, who denies facts, attacks anyone who calls them out or who doesn't align with their narratives, and then claims the victim spot when it is they who are the offender? If this isn't a cacophony of red flags, then I don't know what is. The only thing that I would say to these blind, growing minority is a perfectly applicable Arab saying, Amya ethaffif meynuna, meaning such blind people and Israel are deserving of each other.